Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
Hey, Lenora. I'm Cody Hetzel. I am in charge of the Speaker Bureau for this year's 2022 Childfree Convention. I'm also the founder for Childfree Family, which is a micro-social network for child-free people. And it even has a cool feature that's a little map so you can answer that big question, where are the other child-free people? That's me. Lenora, tell everyone about yourself.
hey everyone, my name is Lenora Faye. I am a child free lifestyle advocate. I am one of the co founders of Child Free Convention, one of the moderators, and the PR manager. I'm also a co host of the international podcast and web series Child Free Girls and the host of Child Free Morning Chat on the Clubhouse audio social app, part of Child Free Club. And welcome to our monthly live stream. What are we talking about today, Cody?
Well, we happen to have a special guest with us. We have Katy from Chasing Creation. Sorry about that. If we can pull her up on the screen. How you doing, Katy?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here. It's kind of it just needed to happen because in learning of the things that you're doing for the childless community and what we're doing with the child-free community, there's a lot of parallel there. And we were just having a meeting one day, and it's like we really need to have Katy on to talk about all the awesome things that she's doing, and kind of how there's a little bit of overlap with with the communities and how we're perceived by society in general. So we thought,
Yeah,
let's make it happen.
I love it. Thank you. I'm excited.
No problem. Well, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Sure. I'll just tell you about my childless journey since that's what I'm here for. I always thought that I wanted kids. My husband was more on the fence about it. So we didn't start trying to have kids until we are about, I think, 8 years into marriage. And he got to a place where he was like, you know what? I'm actually excited. Let's do this. I had always said a no wins. So as long as he was a no, I didn't, push him or like, we just didn't really talk about it because I figured if he wasn't excited, we're not doing it. He got excited. We tried. We did 4 years of infertility. And that included multiple diagnoses for infertility and multiple surgeries, a failed IVF cycle. And then I ended up having a hysterectomy about 5 years ago for health reasons. And that put like the final nail in that coffin of like trying to have a kid. I knew that I didn't want to adopt or pursue other options. So I started Chasing Creation about 3, 4 years ago. And it was really a way for me to connect with other people who have been in a similar situation or, knew what I was going through. And it's kind of grown since then to include a lot of other things. But its main aim is to just provide connection and resources to those who are childless not by choice.
And I guess from the outside looking in, like I want to like always say something like, I'm sorry you had to go through that." Is that something that like the childless community doesn't like to hear? Are there certain like I guess bingos that come along that you hear a lot that you tick the boxes on?
Yeah, I mean, we have our own set of bingos. I think we have some overlap of bingos with the child free community, but I think we have some that are unique to us. But I would say what you just said is a very like kind and empathetic response, and is kind of the ideal of what you would want to hear. I think the ones that we get bingoed on are, well, did you try this? My sister tried this and it worked, or drink this milkshake, it's a miracle and it will get you pregnant. Like I think for the childless not by choice community, it's more getting unwanted advice about how you could keep trying. And it's not kind of never give up attitude of like, if you end your infertility without kids, then you did something wrong. You didn't want it enough. It was not, I don't know. There's like weird connotations to, like people want you to have the ending with the kid. So if you don't have that, they're going to try to push you and give that advice of like, let me tell you all the other things you could try to get a kid.
Like you haven't researched it enough.
Right. And it's usually people who haven't been through it. So you're like, trust me, I know my options. I made the best choices for me. Stay out of my business.
This segues into the next question because what are the similarities you see between the childless and child-free communities? And to what you just said, everyone even wants us to end up with a kid. Like,
Right.
oh, you'll change your mind. So
Right.
the wording may be differently, but they all want the same outcome.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what other similarities do you see between the two communities?
So I think the biggest one is just that we're both communities are living in a pronatalist society, right? So we get a lot of the same feedback from society about our lives not being meaningful enough, or we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, or we're not going to experience true love. It's like those same ideas that come along with pronatalism. I think we both get a lot of those. A few areas where I see some differences is with how people respond. I see a lot of more like, I guess, anger, and I don't know, people seem like I guess like have anger towards the child-free community, or feel like just your decision to not have kids is somehow like an attack on their having kids. Whereas I think that the childless community experiences more pity, which is, I think, annoying in a different way. It's just like you're always the pitiable person. And so you get a lot of that like sappy, oh, I'm so sorry, like your life is so sad now. Which is annoying in its own way. And, you know, it's interesting because I've heard from some child-free people that say, sometimes I say I couldn't have kids so that I don't have to deal with the reaction of people. And then I hear people from the childless community saying, sometimes I tell people I didn't want kids so that I don't have to deal with the pity. So I think sometimes that reaction can be a little bit different of how we're perceived.
It makes total sense. It's one of those things where, you know, for those that don't know all the jargon we're talking about, like pronatalism is kind of the invisible hand behind the scenes where society wants everyone to have a child or multiple children. So that, just think of what you grew up with, your own life script. You know, you go to school, you graduate, you get a job, then you get married, then you have kids, and then that's it. They don't give you any other direction. That's basically pronatalism. So we're on each side of the fence there with the child free and the childless, as far as society thinks that we should all have kids. And so, yeah, with us, they're saying, oh, well, you'll change your mind. And with the childless, it's like, well, you're not trying hard enough. And so it's like, well, there's a no-win situation for all of us there.
Right.
And so you've got an amazing thing that you're working on with the Childless Collective Summit. Tell us about that, because that's really what started all of this conversation to bring you on board, is to hear all the amazing things that you're doing to help your community.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so I started the Childless Collective Summit last year. Was my first time doing it. It's fully online, and it goes over 4 days. So each day has a theme. We've got, the first day is dedicated to our stories. The second day is finding healing. The third day is making connections. And then the fourth day is looking ahead. So I bring it on a kind of wide variety of speakers who don't have kids. So mostly childless, but we do have some child-free speakers, because I think that they offer a really valuable perspective, and can teach the childless community a lot about the perks of not having kids. And so, yeah, it's kind of a mix of speakers, but last year we had 30 speakers. This year we have 40. So it's a lot of presentations across 4 days, and just a chance for people to come together for community and support, and to get some resources, especially to help them with that grief, and trying to figure out, you know, how they want to envision their future when it is going to look different than they had expected.
Can you share the dates with us? Are those released yet?
Yeah, I haven't started promoting yet, but it's July 14th through the 17th, and registration will open on June 20th. So we're a little ways out from that, but.
Okay, and so people do have to register to be able to get access to the video content?
Yeah, but it is free. So you don't have to register, but it's free to attend. So
very cool. And for everyone watching right now, we're live. We'll archive this on YouTube later, but this is live. If you want to ask us a question, feel free, type it in, put a capital Q. That way our tech wizard Jared back there can find your question easier and pull it up for us. If you just have a comment, feel free to make a comment, and, you know, as I say, tag your flag, let us know where you're at in the world. We get viewers from all over the place, and that's always fun. And so, Katy, where do they go if they want to learn more information about your event?
They can just go to chasingcreation.org.
Chasingcreation.org. Awesome,
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
So I was just curious, because we're starting to promote our child-free convention, and I want to bring up trolls just for a second, if you don't mind. Now, you know, we've already touched a bit about the reaction from childless compared to child-free. We get a lot of, and not meaning child-free convention specifically, but child-free content creators tend to get a lot of comments. So I have fun and post about this convention that we do just because you use those trolls as marketing, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes you're like, why would I want to attend something like that? They just think it's ridiculous that we're shoving our happiness in people's faces. So bringing it to the child, from the childless point of view, so child-free, not by choice, however you want to label it, how has, I guess referring to last year, how was that event received by people outside of the community? Do people want you to be quiet? Do they want you to speak louder? What has been your experience?
I feel like I get very little from outside of the childless community. Like I rarely get any trolls. I see that happening to child-free accounts, so I am validating that. Like I see that you guys get it. I don't really get that on mine. And so yeah, I think I really got nothing but support. So I think it's that idea of like people want to see us in grief. They want to see us sad about not having kids, and they're supportive of like, oh, these poor people, get them some help.
So I mean that's really what it speaks to. They can understand grief, they can
Yeah.
understand loss or lacking, but they can't understand the other side of it, where it's this is your choice and you're
Right.
happy in your choice to not have kids. So I mean, it's what do you think about that? I mean, even goes with media, with articles. We
Yeah.
see the term childless widely digestible versus child free, because they're like, well, what is child free? That just sounds so
They just lump us all
mean.
together.
Yeah.
We're all childless to any kind of analytics.
Yep. Yep. I mean, I think it's really frustrating. I think that, I'm really supportive of people who choose to not have kids. And I have a lot of people, I've always had a lot of people in my life that I love who choose not to have kids, and see it as a very, valid option. So I think it is really frustrating. I think there are more conversations happening about like kind of definitions. I know when I get asked to speak anywhere, one of the first questions I'm asked is about definitions. And I know we have like time allotted to just defining, different labels today. So I'm excited to get into that. But I think I'm seeing a lot of conversations about that. And I know it's always the first thing I get asked if I'm on a podcast or anything.
So on that note, you have been recently referring to yourself as child-free in certain posts. So have you had any kind of feedback from your community regarding the term that you are shifting towards potentially?
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of, so I know we'll get into this later, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I think that there's a lot of nuance in the terms that we use, and I don't think that we really have all of the different terms that we need in order to describe our situations. And so I very rarely refer to myself as just child-free, because I feel like I don't really belong to that, but I do sometimes say I'm child-free after infertility, because to me that feels like a way to kind of combine my experience with where I'm at now, because in my mind, in 5 years post hysterectomy, I very rarely experience grief anymore. I'm super happy with where I'm at in my life. And if someone said, I can wave a magic wand and put your baby in your arms right this second, do you want it? I would say no. So I feel like I'm at a place where I feel child-free because I don't want a kid anymore. So it's a difficult thing to try to explain and to figure out like what defines me and where do I feel like I'm at. So yeah, I think there's like more nuance and depth to the conversation than we typically give it, because I think if you just look at the kind of standard definitions that I would say most people would think of with childless or child-free, it's like you don't have kids because you wanted them and couldn't have them, or you chose not to have children because that was your first choice. And I think that there's a lot of people that fall somewhere outside of that. So yeah.
And that brings us like back to exactly what we're all trying to do here. You with the summit, us with the convention. We're just trying to bring more voices, more topics, more panels, more ideas and conversation to happen. And that's really the only way for people to begin dialogue, is just to hear people talking about it and say, I never thought of it that way, or I never, heard it said that way before. That some people might think that, child-free people, look down at childless people. It's not true. There's a swath of child-free people that, if they're childless, they hope that they have kids. Hey, good luck on your journey. Congratulations if it happens. But some people might not think it's that way. And it's just crazy how people can get pigeonholed in both communities from the outside and even from within sometimes. So yeah, gatekeeping is a topic that we covered last year. I don't know if that's something that comes up a lot in your circles or not?
I think the one place I have seen it is sometimes someone who is childless will use like a child-free hashtag or refer to themselves as child-free, and sometimes they'll get messages from someone in the child-free community saying like, "You're not child-free, you shouldn't be using that term," kind of thing. So I think we do sometimes get, I think from people in the child-free community, some feedback of like, this isn't you, you're not part of this community. So I think it's, but other than that, I think there's some interesting conversations going on within the childless community about where people fit in and what it means. So,
and so to that
go ahead.
Sorry. To that point, there are some child-free people who use childless because in their language there is no word for child-free. So they use like childless has a different meaning here, specifically North America than other places, right? So I have seen it the other way. We're like, well, you're child-free. Don't say childless. You know, I guess we're all fighting that battle together, trying to, you know, it's like including everyone, but understanding that, there's no, it's hard to define sometimes. There are some of us who did not ever want to be parents, fly the child-free flag. That's the term we use. We identify. And then when someone says to me, I'm child-free, my default is, oh, you never wanted to have kids. And that's because that's been my experience. But in conversing with other people, you realize, oh, okay, that's not necessarily your journey either. So, you know, at the beginning, I used to be way more hard-nosed about it. I will say, like, I'm on record in a podcast episode with what I thought child-free meant, like the definition. I guess this segues into the next part of the conversation with what does this actually mean?
So what is your definition of childless?
Okay, so I'm going to give you guys my kind of quick answer, like the easy definitions, and then I put together 3 examples for you, and I want you to tell me based on these examples if the person is child-free or childless. Are you up for that?
Let's do it. Yeah.
That's gonna be fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Jared, keep score.
Okay. So I would just say that I think if you're just looking for like very simple definitions of childless, child-free, and what's the difference, my understanding or what I would say is that people who are child-free are living a life where they're happy without kids. If you are childless, you are really grieving and feeling the loss that you don't have kids, and you're identifying with that kind of grief and loss aspect of it. So to me, it's about, I guess, more current feeling than it is at one point, like, did you always want, did you never want? Because I think I see it as more of like a spectrum and more fluid than like you either always wanted kids and couldn't have them, or you never wanted kids. And I think part of that has just been because in my experience, speaking to hundreds, even probably thousands of people, mostly women within my community, I see that there's a lot of, it just doesn't always fit neatly into those 2 categories. So are you guys ready for my examples?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we are.
Okay, so here's the first one. So first we have a woman who never wanted kids. In her 40s, she started feeling some grief about not having kids and started to question her decision. And I know you're going to hate this because it's like a bingo that you guys get, but I do get them in my support group. So it does happen sometimes, not everyone.
Is there a right or wrong answer for these, by the way, before we?
No, I'm just curious. I mean, I think this is more for me to just like try to open this conversation of my belief that it's more of a spectrum. Not everyone can be easily defined into these 2 categories, and maybe we need more terms, maybe we need to expand definitions, but I just don't think people fit. Not everyone fits quite neatly into each category. So, okay. What are your thoughts on this one?
So they didn't want kids, but then later in life they started to feel like they did want to have kids?
No, they just like sometimes they feel grief. Like they're hanging out with their nieces and nephews and they're like, I wonder what this would have been like. I'm a little bit sad about this sometimes.
I mean, I would call that person child-free. I don't know.
What about you, Lenora?
Lenora, go the other way. Go the other way.
I'll be a little more convincing than Cody. That person to me is child-free because, you know, just because you've made a decision, and this goes beyond the child-free decision. When you make a decision to do something, sometimes your mind does wander. Mm-hmm. Like, what if I did this? What if I married this person? What if I didn't get married? What if I moved to a different house? You know, it's just our brains play the what if game, and a lot of times there are times, not specifically with being child free, but you know, when you're around people like that you're around family and you're like, oh, what if? And your brain does weird things and picks up on all sorts of vibes that you're not even paying attention to. So to me, that this person is child free. They're just picking up on the energy around them, and that's totally fine. Because
audience, person one, child free, childless. Put in the comments. Person one.
We're not voting on the right answer.
No, I just want to see what other people think. Before we move forward, let's see.
There's no right answer. I really just put these together to expand the conversation, right? Like these are examples that I see from talking to people in my community. And I would also probably say that person is child free. And I think that grief may be a part of that, right? Like you can be child free and happy with your decision, but still be like, oh, there are moments where like I get a little bit sad, like missing out on this one aspect. Like that would have, I could picture myself doing this thing with a kid. And it doesn't mean that you're unhappy with your decision or that you would have chosen differently, but just that like there are moments parents get to experience and you might think that one moment might have been nice to experience, like
totally.
It's not so clear cut. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's my second example. We have someone who has always been ambivalent about kids. So they sometimes want it, sometimes don't. They're not really sure. They decide to try to have kids. They find out that they're infertile. The doctor tells them, if you want to keep trying for a kid, you need to have infertility treatments. They decide, you know what? I've always been on the fence about this. This is too much. I tried, it didn't work. I feel like I was always on the fence, so I'm good not continuing to try, and I'm just going to live my best life without kids.
These are mean.
No,
in a great way. No.
Like real examples that I get in my community.
They're perfect examples of all the people in like the Facebook groups. It's like, well, you're not this or you are that, and so this person, I guess we would title them as in our world as a fence sitter. So we would say a fence sitter, and then they did try, and then when they determined that they couldn't, they said, hey, I'm good with that. I'm just going to ride it out, and I'm going to be child free. I would be cool with them calling themselves child free, even though they may have been childless for a portion where they wanted to have that child and were unable to. So child free, I guess.
Just to clarify, I said they were mean just because you're making us think live on screen.
I know it.
That's just towards us.
Well, you guys asked me for my opinion on the definitions, and I feel like it's like so complicated for me that I wanted to get your thoughts on this, because I think these discussions are worth having, right? Like if we're going to create this binary of like you're either childless or child free, then like let's talk about what happens when you're in the middle and how are we defining this and where do people fit? Like, do we need more terms, or is it a spectrum? Can you move within your life?
I like what you said about the fluidity.
We need a color-coded system. It's like you are chartreuse.
You're a fence sitter. You're child-free. You used to be child-free. Now you're childless.
We can't get two terms like battened down, let alone a whole color system here. I mean, this example, my first thought is to say childless, for the aspect of trying. However, there are people in my network who that has been their experience, and they're very much child free. So I'm going to say childless just for the sake of actively trying, and that's really what it comes down to. Because fence sitter, that one is really the label, like for me, it comes down to how actively did you try to have a kid, and I don't mean how did you try adoption, like what you've touched on earlier. There's people aren't satisfied until you've tried to adopt every single child that's ever existed, which that's another rant. But I'm gonna say childless with a dash of child free, just because it's so complicated. That's
you're polka dot. You got speckles.
I mean, again, the aspect of trying. This is just my personal opinion. Where's that disclaimer we were talking about? Lenora's opinions don't speak for everybody.
So, audience, person one or person two, child free, childless.
Yeah. Are we getting any opinions on this yet? By the way, if you're watching the replay, feel free to comment. We will engage in comments after this broadcast is over too. So, if you're watching this 3 months from now, still comment, we'll get it.
Okay, you guys ready for my last one?
Wait,
I
well,
don't know.
you didn't tell us what your thought was on it, or was that just kind of
Yeah.
Oh, mine?
yeah?
I don't know. I think this person, I would want to see them define it for themselves, like what term they feel comfortable with.
Oh,
I
come
don't know.
on.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the point I'm trying to make, though, right? Is like it's just complicated. I don't know if the terms always match. If I had to guess, though, I would say if she's really happy with her current life and she doesn't, she's not really grieving not having kids, she's probably child free.
I'm
This is
voted
when
on that
we would
by
have
me.
the hyphen. It would be child free hyphen by circumstance. That's when some people
Well,
like to add
and
those
this
in.
this is the extra. I mean, creating all these different labels, if you will. That's to me that one would ring true too, because again, because it's still your choice at the end of the day. You know how far you're going to pursue. So okay, all right. Are we ready for the last one?
Okay. This person always wanted kids, always was in their plan. Tried a bunch of different fertility treatment options, was not able to have them. It's now 10 years later. This person is in love with the life that they've created. They really don't experience grief around it anymore, and they no longer want kids.
And they tried. They tried to
They
have
tried.
children. Okay.
I mean, again, me with open arms, I'm like, child free. Come on, like it's just, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's all about the trying portion. Like you're planning it out. That's what you want, and you're trying it. That person would, to me, be childless because they are actively pursuing it. But once you kind of cross that line, you say, you know what, I'm good. I'm out. I'm happy. I'm not going to pursue it anymore. Like, again, gatekeeping, whatever. I'm like, hey, bring it on. That to me, child free. I'm just all three child free. Like, X's take the board.
To me, like again, what Cody said, if they are happy with where they are now, I mean, there's no way I would say, oh, you're not welcome in child free spaces. I still will go with the childless label, just if I have to pick one or the other, again, because of the trying part of it. Yeah, again, just with the trying aspect of it. But to me, because again, the default, when someone says they're child free, I still, and this is again Lenora's opinion, they never wanted to have kids, but this was different. And also this question makes me think about the stigma around childless, or the assumption that it's a sad thing,
Yep.
which, part of what you're doing is to acknowledge, but also evolve from, which for us as child-free people, that excites us. The fact that the conversation, I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself and where we're going to go with this, but it's just, I like seeing people evolve to that state of happiness. So this last example, where they are now as child-free, wouldn't start out that way, but I will still say the childless label just for the sake of the rules of the game.
So audience, person 3, childless, child free. Make your selection.
I guess
now.
that's partly the question, right? Like, if it's something here's one. Let's see. If it's about whether or not you wanted it, well, no, I guess, let's see. I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's a flip side to this where a person who is child-free would be considered childless if they have regrets and did change their mind and were sad about it, but they're like in their 50s.
That's kind. I mean,
that's a
it's
good
a really.
One.
Did they switch to childless?
Well, it's an interesting way to look at it, because we're almost putting a stereotype on each one of them. To be childless, you have to be grieving and sad, and to be child-free,
Right.
you have to be completely happy and living your best life ever on your jet ski in Cancun. Like, so is that a stereotype that we're even like snowballing even with our own communities?
Because that question makes me think of those who are child-free because, for health reasons. There's a lot of that. They haven't tried to have kids, but they're not having children, or those that say they're child-free because of climate change. So then that makes me ask, and I'll use Miley Cyrus as an example, because she's a while ago, she was quoted as saying she wasn't going to have children until or because of because of climate change. So does that mean you actually want to have kids, but by circumstances they just aren't there, whether it's health reasons, environmental reasons, partnership reasons? Is that child free or is that childless? Because what if your life was perfect and the world was perfect? Would we have kids? My answer is no. But, for anyone out there, like, where do we not draw the line, but draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in my community, I tend to get a lot of people who never had an opportunity to try to have kids because they either never found a partner that they wanted to have kids with, or they had, like you said, health issues. Maybe they didn't feel financially secure enough to have a child. There are like so many different reasons. And a lot of those people do consider themselves childless because maybe they wanted them, but they weren't able to have them. And so I think it just gets into this question of, is child free or childless based on, did you always want, did you never want? And what about the people who fluctuate or move between those two? And then, or is it a current frame of mind where it's like, I like my life without kids and I'm happy without them, or I feel like there's something missing and I feel a loss without them. And so it's, yeah, I mean, I don't have answers. I'm bringing this up to just show how complicated it can be and that people don't often just fit into these like tidy categories.
And it depends on the person's perspective that is coming up with that as well. I think analogy is the right word. Maybe we're like, if you look at life like you're going to ride a roller coaster, you pick your seat and you ride the ride. You can't hop out and get in a different seat. But if you're on a bus, don't move around on a moving bus. Jared will attest to this. Don't get up on a moving bus and move around, but you can change seats on a bus. And so it depends if are you riding a roller coaster or are you going to ride the bus? And so how you look at life and if there's some fluidity that can happen and openness to change and different opinions. Again, it's a great conversation that I'm glad that we're having, and we definitely need to continue to have.
That last comment was interesting versus the opportunity that never arose. I mean, it also makes me think of people that just, they say they didn't choose to be child free. They just didn't have kids. It just never, like, the conversation never came up. They're not trying. They never thought about it. It was just a natural progression for life. So are they child free because they didn't choose? It just, there's no sadness involved, no questioning. It's just, that just felt like the right thing to do. I mean, even Cody, in your situation, you didn't even know of the term. Well, I don't think any of us really knew the term.
Had no idea until like 2014. And at that point, my wife and I, we were married in 2010, and we had decided to not have a child in our marriage. And that was back when we were dating. And then all of a sudden, like, 4 years later, after being married, it's like, oh, there's actually a term for what we are, child free. And then, down the rabbit hole, here I am. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it just depends on someone's situation. Like, either you back into it, or like some people say, well, I've known since I was, 3 years old. It's like, well, I mean, you're a good reader if you're able to look up in Google and find out all these terms. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it even gets more complicated because if you look just even within the childless community, you have people using like child-free after infertility, or childless after infertility, or childless by circumstance. A lot of times that's what people use if they didn't find a partner but wanted kids. You have what are the other ones that I see a lot? Childless by marriage. You wanted kids, your partner didn't. I mean, I feel like in my life, I probably started as childless by marriage because my husband didn't want kids for the first 8 years, and then he was excited about having them. So then I was childless by infertility, and now I kind of consider myself child-free after infertility because I don't want kids anymore and I'm happy without them. So it's complicated.
These are all new things I'm learning. There's all these new terms. I mean, and I don't know if it's the same in the childless community, but child-free community, we don't really like the term child-free. It's just kind of what we've been given, and we're just running with it. It's like
same. Anytime I poll my audience, which I know we'll get into because I did do some polling of on Instagram, the number one thing that comes up is like, I don't like any of the terms. I don't feel like these define me. I don't want to be defined by this. And so to me, I think the terms are helpful. The reason we need terminology around it, in my mind, is more about community and being able to process and being able to find others who we can process with and be in community with. But I don't, in my daily life, I don't use these terms to describe myself. Like if I'm just meeting someone, I'm like, yeah, I don't have kids. Like I don't define myself by these in relation to other people. I really use them in hashtags and in within my community to describe kind of what we're going through and find that like community and support.
Okay,
Nope,
sorry.
there we go.
What's
We're
happening
moving
here?
around.
I mean that's the big thing is about using the terms to find other people, because I mean the three of us can absolutely attest to with our lives how it's changed our lives by using those terms to build and you know build communities, to reach people, and you know to network. So there is a place for it. And I mean honestly, like anyone that owns a domain, if we finally settled on a term, we'd really have to rebrand everything, and we all know rebranding can be annoying. So
All the
so
books would be outdated.
I don't know that the term's going to go, you know, away anytime soon, whether child-free or childless. But actually, this question just came to mind, and this goes, anyone can answer this one. But do you feel like, okay, how does one accept the terms that are out there?
Pre-described?
Yeah. Pre-described without being super offended and using it to your advantage. I mean, we've all done it so far. Like we've turned it into something, but I feel it's possible. You know, it might not be the best solution, but what would you advise someone who is, you know, hates the term childless or child-free, but is a part of the community and wants to connect, but without taking it so personally? Like, you know what I mean? Does that make any sense? You know, because it's out there and we use it. And
I think that's where people try to personalize it, and they'll say child-free by circumstance. And so if someone tells me they're child-free by circumstance, I don't just assume it's for health reasons or IVF. It might be because of financial. It could be, you know, societal. It could be, you know, the just global warming, whatever it is. And so those are circumstances that they've chosen to be child-free with. And if, you know, in a perfect world, they would have kids. But if they say they're child-free by choice, then it's like, okay, you know have made an active decision. No matter what, if you won the lottery, you still would not have a kid. And I don't know. I think that's where all these different hyphens and add-ons, like what Katy was talking about in the childless community, are coming out. We really just have two in the child-free community. It's either by choice or by circumstance.
Yeah,
we're not as creative, I guess.
Well, I think you know, it's interesting because I think within the childless community, you know, a lot of my audience went through infertility because that was my story. That's what I talk about a lot. But I, like last year at my summit, I had so many people write to me and say, you didn't have any speakers that I identified with that shared my experience. And so this year I really had to look through, okay, what experiences am I representing through different speakers, and how am I making sure that everyone feels included and that they see some of their story represented? And I think the biggest one was the group of people who were not able to have kids but wanted them, and it's because they didn't find a suitable partner, or maybe they did but they got divorced. So it's about the coupling, and that's actually the largest percentage of people who are childless not by choice is due to like relationship status. I think it's only about 10% of those who don't have kids that tried and couldn't. So we're actually a pretty small minority.
Wow. I'm fascinated by that. Okay.
And something along the same lines. That's how we went from having, like, you know, a few dozen topics. Now we've got oodles of topics in 2 days versus 1 day. It's because we want to try to encapsulate as much as we can of the conversation. Yeah, I can imagine you went through the same thing, just with the feedback that you got, and just building on every year, making every year better and better. And so definitely we want to encourage all that awesomeness going on.
And this speaks to the people speaking out. We don't know what is needed until people say something, right?
Yeah,
we
exactly
create starting from our own experiences because that's all we have to work with. But until people start stepping up, whether it's publicly or privately reaching out, then you know, oh, there's more out there.
Well, and it's hard for me too, because I can only find people who are speaking out publicly about this, right? Like, I'm not going to ask someone who attends my support groups, like, hey, do you want to be a speaker? Because they might not be public about this. It may not be something that they want to share or talk about so publicly. And so I think when it comes to representation, I try really hard to, like diversity and having that like really wide representation is really important to me. But I think I can only select speakers from the people who I know are out there and like talking about this publicly. And that can be hard because like sometimes last year, I got people saying, well, you didn't really have very many people who are single but wanted kids. And I tried to like find those people who have public accounts on it. And I can only find a couple. Like there's just not that many, even though I know it's like the majority of people without kids are in that circumstance. There's not very many that I can find that are like talking about it publicly that I could invite to the summit. So it's also really interesting to just kind of see same thing with like, I would love to have more LGBTQ plus speakers. I can't find very many who are out there who are really talking about this publicly. So I think there's some barriers to diversity and inclusion right now in terms of this still being very taboo and like people a lot of people not wanting to talk about it publicly.
We can totally understand that, and that's it. The child-free space is getting a little bit bigger and bigger every year as people are willing to step out of the shadows and talk about it. But somewhat along the same lines is they have to put themselves out there publicly to get at least on our end all the trolls that will come along with it, and people who have had their jobs threatened and their even beyond that, just really bad things that people will say to you. And so I totally understand the situation. So anyone out there, if you know of someone that might be in the boat for the Childless Summit, let Katy know. Send her. I don't know if it's too late now, but at least for next year, at least they can join
next
in.
Year.
Next year for sure. Like get her some more awesome speakers. We all need more people picking up the mantle and talking about this, because this is how we're getting where we're going.
So do we want to get into the poll results from your audience regarding the definitions?
I'm good with that. Should we do it?
Okay, well, let's do it.
We haven't touched about child free. Did you have a definition for child free, or was that lumped into the previous one?
Oh, my definition?
Yeah, what's your definition of what child free is?
She did say it.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say it's like someone who is happy without kids, like who doesn't want them. But see, I think I would differ in Lenora, because I would say it's more of like a current state of mind, like where you're at currently, than did you try, like what did you want previously?
This is why I have a 12-page 12-page interview when I meet people, so that I can see where on the child free spectrum are you. Because when I ask child free, I have these assumptions. So now I'm like, all right, here you go, fill out this survey and I'll get back to you, and then we'll go, all right, anyway.
I mean, I still will say though, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just think that, my purpose in bringing this up is to just maybe start the conversation about how do we define this, and is it capturing where people would place themselves, or where, how people are feeling. So
not just defining it, but taking some ownership of it. Like I said, these are the monikers that we've been given, and so we're going to make it our own.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this is what's going to come through as I share some of the community responses when I polled. So I did this on Instagram yesterday. I had over 200 people respond to all the questions. So
That's
it's
awesome.
A pretty large sample. Okay, so the first one, and these were questions that you all asked me to ask. So I asked all the ones you told me to, and these are the responses I got. So the first one was, you were wondering if it was offensive to people who are childless, if people who are child-free say that being a parent is a choice. And it was pretty split. So 56% said, yes, I would take offense to that, or it would upset me if I heard someone say that. And 44% said no.
Wow. Okay. Were either of you surprised by that many people taking offense?
I think it's probably specific to the exact language you use.
Okay.
I think the way it was phrased is like, would you be upset? Like, as someone who is childless, not by choice, would it upset you to hear someone who's child-free say that being a parent is a choice? Because they didn't have it. So that was how it was worded, 56% yes. I would say if you change the wording and said, if let's see. Would you be upset by someone who is child-free saying, for people who are able to have children and don't, parenthood is a choice? You would probably have that go way down by like putting that disclaimer in there, you know?
So it's really acknowledging. It's acknowledging those that can't, and it's how. Okay, yeah.
I would guess so. I didn't do a follow-up, but I would guess so. Mm-hmm. Because I think everyone understands that there are people who don't want kids and that that's like a valid choice, and that for them that is a choice. So I think it's more just the acknowledgement that some people don't have a choice of whether or not they are a parent.
Makes sense.
Okay, so the next thing I asked was, let me get my notes out here. So I asked my audience, do you consider yourself child-free or childless? 16% said they use the term child-free to describe themselves, and 84% said they use childless. So that one didn't surprise me.
Sure.
This one actually did surprise me. So in asking, do you feel like these terms are interchangeable? 23% said yes, and 77% said no. So I thought that yes, just feeling like the two terms were interchangeable felt really high to me, 23%.
Take that, online dictionaries that use the same definition.
Literally the same definition without child for both.
Right. And I mean, 77% said, yeah, I don't think that these are interchangeable. And I do wish, especially like you guys said with like journalism, that they, and the media, that they started to parse these out and use more appropriate terms. Because I think like we can argue about internal definitions and get all nuanced and talk about it's a spectrum and we have all these like hyphens and whatever. But I think if we're just talking generally outside of our communities with society, I think the easiest way is like, let's stick to child-free and childless as a more standard definition, like the easy answer, and start using those more appropriately as a starting place.
So if anyone out there is doing research for an article or a book, or don't be lazy. Like pick whichever camp you want to talk about and use the correct term for us to help us out.
Yep.
You know what?
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say the hyphen thing. Childless doesn't get hyphenated, but child-free does. Have you noticed that? What's up with that? Because we're trying to keep like child-free one word, but a lot of times it's child-free, but childless is generally
but in the older ways of literally like 2008, it did say like childless by choice. I believe it's Wikipedia. Someone can double check me on Wikipedia. If you type in child-free, it takes you to childless by choice, which
but childless itself is not hyphenated though. They keep that one word. I mean that to some of us, Cody, it matters. That hyphen matters. That is not there, but it's curious. It's like, this is just my observation with media specifically. It's like anything to kind of take away any kind of seriousness on the child-free conversation and choice, and that is maddening because it's just like, oh, child-free. It's this kind of fluffy thing. As in, it's a fluffy life. But there's more to it, as we know. But it's not perceived that way. Where childless is, there is, and rightly so, there needs to be respect on both camps. But to me, it just feels like the child-free conversation hasn't reached that level of respect. And again, because of the emotion behind what childless is perceived as and is experienced, rightly so, not taking anything away from that. It's just curious how it's, again, taken and received and presented. It's easier to say you're childless. So, okay, I'm done. Continue.
Okay, so again, I would say that a lot of people in the childless community would say that they don't like any of the terms available to them, and they have some really interesting like ways that they'll say that they don't have kids that feel more comfortable to them. But for those, so I asked my audience, what do you think the definition is of childless and then of child-free? So of childless, I think it's pretty much what you'd expect. Most of the answers were kind of in line with what we have been talking about. Most people said that they that it's someone who wanted kids but couldn't have them for any reason. So that was the biggest answer that came through. But I pulled out a couple quotes that I thought were kind of interesting, where people responded, and their responses were a little bit different. So someone said they would consider someone childless, or they consider childless as feeling like something is missing from your life if you don't have a child. Someone else said, to me, less equals lacking. I'm not interested in feeling less anymore after infertility. Someone else said, still having longing for a child. And someone else said, overall, a loss of not having a child. It's an emptiness that isn't fillable. And then another person said, when it's not your choice and feels like something that has been taken away from you. So those were some of the ones that were maybe a little more nuanced than just the like couldn't have kids.
Yeah. And you can kind of feel their journey along in their responses as well. I mean, that's what the term it's to the general public, it's just a word, but to us, it means something more. Like that, yeah. It's the lifestyle that you're currently living. Like that's who you are.
And I would say, earlier you asked like, what do our communities have in common? And I would say this is one of them, is that we're both very misunderstood by society generally for different reasons. But I think we both feel that frustration of like not getting like the coverage or understanding or like to the outside world. Like it feels difficult to communicate our experience and have that validated and seen and like understood by people.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost feels like to the outside world, they look at childless and they're like, just adopt, just get over it. And to the child free, it's like, get over yourselves, have a kid. It's it
all ends the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last question I asked was, how would you define that child free? And again, no surprise, most people said something along the lines of it's people who made a choice not to have kids, not to have kids. But then there were a couple that I think maybe are a little more nuanced that I wanted to share that came in. So someone said, someone who doesn't have kids and enjoys that lifestyle. So to me, that would be someone more present. But again, it could be someone who used to be childless but is currently enjoying a child-free lifestyle. Someone else said, enjoying the freedom of not being parents. Someone else said, a desire to live a life without children, not feeling something is missing. Someone else said, someone who is content or happy living a life without children. Another one was no longer grieving being childless, accepting and embracing this life. And somebody said, I prefer this term because it's a subtle reminder that I'm not to be pitied. So I definitely I think there's like a certain segment of the childless community who kind of sees a shift from being childless to child free as like, if I work through a lot of my grief, I'm no longer feeling super sad about it. I'm creating all this like happiness and joy in the life that I have. And I'm actually like embracing the fact that I don't have kids and enjoying that. That I think some people kind of see it as almost a transition of like, can I shift from feeling childless to feeling child free? And it's more of like a state of mind of like, how do I feel about my life? And if I no longer feel that I'm missing a child because I don't want one anymore, is it possible to like make that transition? And I think so this idea for me, I don't know if you probably haven't heard of this because it's super old, but there's a book that was published in like 1985, I think. It's super old, but it's a couple who wanted kids and couldn't have them. And they wrote a book called Sweet Grapes, Stop Being Infertile and Start Living Life Again. I think it's something like that. And their whole premise of the book was like, is it possible to go from being childless to feeling like you're child free? And so I think that's kind of where the idea captured my imagination of like, what's the difference between the two? And if you get to a place where you create a life that you love so much that you no longer, like kids no longer fit into it and you're no longer wanting that, are you now child free? I don't know. I guess that's a question that's up for debate, right? But
yeah, it'll be going on for a little while, I believe.
I'm sure, yeah.
I just want to say I'm born the end of 82. I don't think anything in 85 is super old yet. But that's just...
Well, I think for like a book,
I wasn't going to say anything.
You're older than I am. Good.
I am.
No,
Gen X all the way.
I'm 40, so I mean, I also was born in 82, but I think when I say old, I feel like for this conversation, for this couple to have written a book talking about the nuances of being childless and child-free and what that means to them, and like to be published in 85, I feel like that was pretty rare at that time for a book like that to be published. So I just meant old in terms of like the conversation, and I was surprised that that was taking place in 85.
The golden age of the conversation.
Which,
there you go.
I mean, and it's great because we've seen an explosion of childless and child-free content in the last few years. And to me, I only see it getting bigger and louder, and that's exciting. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Katy, as a content creator in your community, when you see people in your community transition as like journey through from sadness to grief to kind of like, oh, and then embracing and being happy, how does that make you feel? Like, how do you feel witnessing that?
I mean, I want to be really careful how I answer this because I think it is a really beautiful thing. I love people finding healing and loving the life that they're living, especially if they went through a lot where, you know, maybe they thought they'd never be happy in their current life, or that wasn't going to be available to them, that they'd always just be immersed in grief, and that was what they could expect for the rest of their lives. But I want to also be careful because I know there are a lot of people who don't like the idea of this idea that you can like kind of shift from being childless to feeling more child-free, because there's definitely like some within my community that feel like once you're childless, you're always childless. And if you use that terminology of like you're childless, but you kind of shift to being child-free, it takes away from the experience of like wanting kids, and it makes it feel this pressure. Like if you still experience grief later, or you still feel a loss throughout your life, that there's something wrong with you, because why didn't you transition into just loving the life that you have? And so I think, again, it's like there's not an easy answer, because I think like if someone carries that loss with them throughout their life and they still are feeling that grief, and they want to, and they feel more comfortable carrying that label of being childless, and that's what they connect with. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. I think, I see a lot of people take that path as well. And a lot of them are living like super happy lives, despite, not having what they had wanted. So I don't know, again, I don't want to dismiss anyone's path or how they define it for themselves. But I will say that I think it's pretty common that a lot of the Instagram accounts that I see who start out as childless accounts, within a couple years, they change their handle. They're not really talking about their grief anymore. They're not really talking about being childless, because it becomes less less a part of their identity, where it's not taking up so much space in their life, and they're just filling it with other things that they used to enjoy or that they're discovering. And that is really good. I mean, in my, I think in some ways that could be a best case scenario, right? Like loving the life that you're in. So.
I mean,
it's interesting. It's interesting to hear you talk about there's a term within the child free. It's the aggressively child free. People who are like hardcore child free, gonna let you know about it. And it's interesting to hear there's the same type of thing in childless. It's like, no, you're childless, and if you don't do this certain thing, then you don't appreciate the process or what. It's very interesting. Again, another similarity that I never thought would have existed.
Yeah.
And also too, with someone who has said they never wanted to have kids and then decides to have children. I mean, that I feel like that, from what I've seen in the child-free community, the reaction, especially if it's somebody who is public, like, I mean, Cameron Diaz has never been in the child-free community per se, but she's been quoted time and time again for saying, you don't have to have kids. And then she has a child. And then when that news came out, I mean, basically child-free Instagram exploded.
Okay. The equivalent of that in our community are the miracle baby stories. So when somebody's like, I'm 45 and I did a round of IVF and now I have a baby, and you're like, shut up. Like, no, that doesn't happen very often. And it becomes kind of a norm of like this, I think, especially within popular culture, like you usually only hear about the success stories. And so the idea of like someone goes through infertility and then has the miracle baby, I think we get those same reactions. probably our equivalent to that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Because then it's like, see, you just keep at it, you'll get it eventually. And I mean, okay, so it's nice to know that we all get annoyed by that same thing. Because it isn't, I mean, great, you're happy, wonderful, but okay. Yeah, it's, again, that's why these conversations are great, because you realize there are a lot of similarities. And again, it's worded differently, it's presented differently, but the bottom line is it's the same energy, same spirit, really.
Yeah. And I know we're probably at time, but I just wanted to add, I think when it comes to like media coverage, I don't think I would mind the stories as much of like this person, went through infertility and then they had this miracle baby. I don't think I would mind that as much if there were just as many articles talking about someone went through infertility and they didn't have a kid, and guess what, they're okay. Like, yes. If they were balanced, but it's probably the same, right? People want the babies, everyone wants a story that ends with a baby.
That's the pronatalism work. It works against both our communities. It works against both. And again, someone who's child free that might have never thought they would get any kind of a relationship with the childless person from watching this video might finally see it's like, oh my God, we are in this together, because pronatalism media, it's gonna cram down your throat. The end result should be a child for both parties. Like it,
Yeah. And so, I would say, like, I think there's so much that the childless community can learn from the child-free community. I say that all the time because as people who this was your first choice, was living a life without kids, it's been so helpful for me to hear, like, what are the things that you love about it? What does it allow you to experience that would have been harder if you had a kid? Or like, tell me more about that, because it's helped me shift my perspective. Like, I grew up Mormon, where I was literally taught that like my only purpose of being on the earth was to have kids. And so, even though I hadn't been Mormon for like 10 years, when I was trying to get pregnant, I found myself talking about those like things that I heard in Mormonism all the time in therapy, because even though I wasn't Mormon anymore, like a lot of it had just become so like deeply shoved down in there that I had to like get it out and like wrestle with it. So it's been really nice. Like, I've always had child-free friends, and I love talking to them and just hearing about like, why did you choose this? Like, tell me more about like what you love about it, because it helps kind of shift that frame of mind. And we don't hear stories of people who don't have kids and are super happy. And so I think the more stories we have of either people who are childless and find a way to love their life despite the fact that they had wanted kids, or people who are child-free, that the more we can hear stories and examples of that, it's just really, it's helpful.
Well, I think I can speak for the three of us. You've got three more friends.
Yes.
So feel free to talk to us and ask us any questions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, like, where's the third person? But right. We have Jared behind the scenes.
He's there. He's waving to nobody.
Yes.
So we'll wrap up real quick. So Katy, give your summit another plug, let people know about it. And yeah.
Yep. So it's the Childless Collective Summit. You can go to my website at chasingcreation.org and go to, there's a little part on my menu that says Childless Collective Summit. You can't officially register until June, but there is a wait list, so you can join the wait list and be one of the first people to know when you can sign up. It's free to attend, 4 days, 40 speakers, whole range of topics, a few child-free speakers as well. So it's going to be great.
Child-free folks, check it out too. No reason not to. And so for us, we have the Childfree Convention coming up on July 30th and 31st, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time date, whatever it is. Just type in New York at 9 a.m. and just go off of that. That's what we'll go with. And we want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors, 365 Diversity, Best Child-Free Life Possible, Buy Child-Free, Buy Child-Free, Child-Free Family, Child-Free Journals, Child-Free Wealth, and as always, StreamYard, who makes exactly what we're doing right now possible by giving us some really cool toys for Jared to play with in the background.
So also quick plug. Okay, first of all, Jared, are you out there? Do you want to come up on screen?
Yeah.
All right. So quick shout out. Who are you? What do you do? Where can people find you? And by that, I mean, what's your Facebook group? That's really what I'm asking. You don't have to give us a job description.
Yeah. I could talk to you about my empire.
No. Okay. All right.
Best Child-Free Life Possible Facebook group. We have a Child-Free Runners group. We are doing the Child-Free 5K and 10K this week. You can sign up on Strava. that Child Free Runners United or the Child Free Runners Facebook group. It's free. Just go for a run, 5K or 10K, wear a child free shirt while you're doing it. And then afterwards, publicly say that you're child free out loud in the public. And that next year we'll try to get it more organized and maybe meet at one spot. But that's what's going on this week. So you guys got to check that out. Get yourself over to that Facebook group, Child Free Runners.
All right, Cody, are you running? Or just yelling, I am child free without running?
I mean, I yell I'm child free every day.
Me too.
Verbalizing it, just saying it, even to like just in your house, like, hey, I'm child free. Like the more you say it, the more it becomes comfortable. And that to me, that's the first step of that child free lifestyle is just acknowledging that you're child free. And so, Lenora, anything you want to plug? I know you do a lot of cool stuff.
You didn't plug your stuff.
I kind of did in the beginning, but okay. Well, childfreefamily.com is it's a micro social network for child-free people and childless people. You can join it too. No opinions here. There's an awesome forums. You can make groups. There's a map so you can find other people that live near you. We just had a big explosion of, I think, like 80 people joined just last week. So there's more little markers. So if you don't see a marker like in your city or around you, be that first marker. Join it. It's kind of one of those little social networks back when it used to be fun. There's no algorithm. It's not tracking. I'm behind. I don't care where you are and what you shop and what you look. I don't care. Like literally, it's just a website and it's a profile and a map. Like just enjoy meeting people. That's my hard sell.
Awesome. All right. Well, you can find me at Child Free Blog on TikTok now. Apparently, I'm on TikTok and over on Instagram. You can also listen to my podcast, Child Free Girls. It's an international podcast and web series I co-host. We are all over social media there. And of course, Child Free Morning Chat, I host every Monday through Friday on the Clubhouse app, part of Child Free Club. We all may be, slightly obsessed with child free and childless conversations. So thank you all for your support. Thank you for your support. And of course, Katy, thank you so much for joining us today. We deeply appreciate this. It's been an amazing conversation. If you're watching the replay, please feel free to email us. Email Katy, leave comments. We will read them. We will reply to them. If you have a question for Katy and you want to leave it, we'll make sure she gets it as well. Of course, don't forget the upcoming 2022 Virtual Child Free Convention happening July 30th and 31st. Our email, is childfreeconvention@gmail.com. Our website is childfreeconvention.com. And we are all over social media at childfreeconvention.com.
Ta-da!
Yeah, who would have thought? So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll chat again soon.
See you later.